school.
Yeah, all right, let's talk about mentoring. What did you learn?
Well, I learned that it's okay to fire a client. And sometimes it's more than okay. It's absolutely necessary. And that was a very startling revelation. I was with, at the time, a large firm in Dallas. I was the 55th lawyer, the third woman at the firm. There was one woman partner. Her name happened to be Harriet Myers, who you may have heard of before. And the senior most litigation partner in the firm, I was working on a case with him for some very prominent Dallas folks, the names you would recognize. And one day I came in and Stanley said, pack up what you're working on and send it over to my office. And I was, oh my, Midge's point, what did I do wrong? And the answer was, we didn't do anything wrong, but we had declined to continue the representation of these very prominent, very wealthy folks. And I was startled. And he was a wonderful man. And he looked at me and said, all you have is your reputation. All we have as a firm is our firm's reputation. And we weren't going to do what they wanted us to do. And so we have parted our ways.
Can I give a definition of mentor?
Yeah, definition of mentor, fine. And we can agree to disagree on it, too.
Sure. A mentor is an experienced, well-established member of your profession who takes an interest in your career and facilitates your development through providing crucial information, making important introductions, serving as a role model, providing support, encouragement, and guidance, encouraging your participation in making decisions, and in other ways makes a significant contribution to your career. More specifically, I'm sorry to read this, but I can't memorize it, sorry, creates opportunities to operate outside the organization norm, which is highly important, sets high performance standards that stimulate personal motivation, publicizes your achievements, protects you, and provides a safe environment to generate and try out your new ideas, fosters learning, improves your work environment, and overall boosts your job satisfaction and accelerates your career progression.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
And who views your success as a measure of his success.
And it's very,
and I say his because my mentor was Dave Sykes,
yeah,
who he handed things to me and he viewed my success as the measure of his success. But that's excellent.
One other thing, it's the person who's the most honest with you.
Right.
The biggest problem that I've found as a manager of lots and lots of people over the years, or as a team leader, is when there's a difficult situation, there are a lot of people, men and women, who find it extremely difficult to be honest with the person. So instead, they just don't promote them and don't mentor them and all that and hope it goes away or eventually fire them. The thing that I think I do well and I think other good mentors do well is to look at you and say, you need to change certain things. You're too harsh. The way you communicate doesn't work. The way you appear does not work professionally, et cetera, et cetera. Those are very hard messages, but they're some of the best you can ever get. Or when somebody says, you know what, you're really great, but you don't know how to listen. That's actually, you need to hear that. And I think the difficult feedback is the hardest thing, so a mentor who can do that is actually serving you well. You should listen most closely to criticism.
you're right. Mentors take personal risks. That's something you all have to remember. If you're being mentored by someone and you screw up, it reflects on them.
Yeah.
And depending on how badly you screw up and how strong a mentor they've been and how active a mentor they've been, it could be a real problem.
Right. Dave Sykes once said to me, lower your voice. Yeah. Now that sounds like a very sexist thing to say, but he's absolutely right. If I'm in court and there is a woman at the podium arguing and she gets shrill, woo, woo, you zone out. Everybody zones out. But if you speak with a lower voice of authority, it has impact. For him to say that to me, for all he knew, I would, go leave the job and say, I was outraged at whether he would say that. Marcia, you probably had a similar situation.
I've had similar experiences, and I think your tone and how you present yourself is all about confidence. And I think when Judge Rendell opened up and talked about the woman who thinks she did something wrong as compared to the man who, it's clearly the razor, that is a theme that I see over and over again. And I think mentoring is incredibly important. Thankfully, we have a lot of women in our practice today. And I told this last night, but I think a mentor, the success of a mentor is measured by the success of those he or she mentors. And we had this program in the firm, and I introduced Harvey, and I said, you may find this surprising, but 33% of the partners in our restructuring department are women. And he didn't even register that that was true. And I think that's, he was sort of always an inadvertent mentor because he treated everybody that way. I mean, good and bad and brutally honest and very, in many times difficult to work for or with, as the case, depending how senior you were. But I think that's very important. But then it goes to confidence. I think one of the things he said to me early on is, speak up. And I think that's a woman's issue, is you have to feel like you could speak up. Of course, in more recent times, he says to me, why'd you talk so much? Because you told me to speak up. And he says, he's the one at fault. But we showed this video in a women's breakfast we had in my department. It was the COO, I think, of Google. I think she was the COO. And her theme was, be at the table. Yeah. And you'd be surprised how much conversation that generated in the room with my partners. This is just the women in my restructuring group and my associates, about how they felt about that comment. And a lot of times a woman gives up her seat to a man. Yeah. You're just as important.
You're being nice.
Because you're being nice.
Don't be so nice.
How many times have you been in a conference room when the phone rings? And who gets it? Okay.
Or closes the door.
Or closes the door, or gets up to open the door, or I still clean the conference table. I mean, things like that. If somebody spills something, because you can't help. It's almost like you can't help yourself. I don't really do that, but we'd have this conference room in our department, and the guys would just get up and leave. And then one day, one of my partners, a woman, said, "You guys, would you clean up that conference table?" And this young associate complained, called her a witch, and I was like, it's just that they were so not used to sort of the, kind of taking care of things and doing things together, where it's late at night, no one's going to clean up after you, and they were kind of just leaving it to the girls,
In our
that kind of
firm, we
thing.
put up a sign, and it was generated by the women associates, a sign in our conference center kitchen. Your mother does not work here.
And the men need that. The women don't.
The men need that. Women know, yeah.
Can I change it a little bit in terms of the mentoring and go back to, I think it's really important to know who your mentors are, identify them. If you don't have one, think about getting one. I've been very fortunate. I'm just going to quickly tick them off because each taught me something important. My parents started with, and it was all about education. They're both teachers. They had 5 of us. Every single one of us is overeducated. But the fact of the matter is, it mattered. The more you learn, the more you can do. And it's that way to this day. The second one, I would say, more recent one, was our CEO, Jamie Dimon, when he appointed me treasurer of the firm. I knew nothing about treasury. I said no 10 times, and finally took it on the eve of the Lehman bankruptcy, 10 days before. It was taking risk. His view was, you learn from what you do, not from what you don't, a famous quote, but it's very true. So take risks, take personal risks. We talk about it a lot, but actually doing the deep end of the pool at a time of crisis is amazing for your career. So I would say that. You got to know the details and got to do it well. Jimmy Lee, another one many people know in the financing world, always told me 2 things. One, be the best you can be, which sounds obvious, but you got to think about that every day. Every day, I just got to do the very best I can because, like you said, people are going to remember what you do. What have you done for me lately, or what's the last thing you did? And the other thing was the clients pay the bills. You can never forget that you're actually working for someone. So it's not always about you. It is about the clients and doing the right thing for them. And then I'd say lastly, and one of my favorite things came from Bill Repko, who many of you know worked at JP Morgan for a long time, now at Evercore. And what he said to me, he said, when you get in a room with a client, he said, just remember this one thing. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And in a restructuring environment, that matters a ton. So be human first and listen. And as soon as they appreciate and understand, you're going to laser focus, you're going to help them. The other thing, don't put a BlackBerry or phone on the table in front of you when you're talking to a client. You've just sent a message that they're not the most important thing in the room. Something else might come that you have to step away for. Do not check your BlackBerry when you're sitting with a client, especially one in trouble. I don't care who it is. Like, unless somebody in your family's either having a baby or dying, which you should say, that's why you're doing it. Otherwise, don't do it. So I think those lessons, kind of feel the fear and do it anyway, which is the way I always think about it, matter
now
a
the
lot.
only woman you've mentioned who was a mentor was
Right,
your
my
mother.
mom. That's right.
Now, does mentoring come naturally to women? Do we need to work at it? Do we seek mentors from above? Or if we're above, do we reach down? Who was it who said there's a special place reserved in hell for women who don't help other women? But sometimes I think
that at dinner last night.
yeah, well, whatever. I forgot. But how do we institutionalize? We say we like to help people problem solve, but I think sometimes women are the worst at mentoring other women. And
they don't have a lot of time.
well, that's true. I see my former partners at my firm more now than I did when I was in the firm because I was just too busy. And we'll get to balance at some point.
But I think that's true, Midge, and I think it's in part because, particularly as we were growing up, I feel like you had to work harder to succeed than male associates at the firm did. And as a result, I think you were so focused on success
And toughing it out.
developing the relationships with clients and learning how to make rain and do other
And
things.
go home and take care of kids if you had
If
kids.
you had
husbands,
kids.
and all the rest of
And
it.
so I think it has been difficult. Just a funny mentoring story because it picks up on what, frankly, everybody has said. Mickey Scheinfeld ultimately became my mentor. After becoming a partner at the first firm that I had been with, Mickey reached out to me and asked me to move from the current firm that I'd been with. And you have to understand, when I got out of law school in 1978, the mentality of firms was you were going there for the rest of your career. And that's startling to many of you in the room because that's no longer really the mentality. And so when I joined a firm called Locke, Purnell, Boren, Laney, and Neely that is now Locke Lord, I thought I'd be there forever. And I loved the firm. And so frankly, when Mickey Scheinfeld, who had a national bankruptcy reputation, called me and said, I want to talk to you about coming over to our Dallas office and actually heading it up as the shareholder in charge of the office, I told him no. I'm happy where I am. Thank you very much. I'm flattered. And he said to me, well, I thought we were friends.
Happy
Well,
where I am.
And
Happy
so,
where I am, as
you know, the rest is history. I joined the firm, became the shareholder in charge of the Dallas office. And Mickey's a wonderful man, still in practice. And he was somebody that it became so clear to me, just from his example. And I think that, you know, Judy will probably say this if I don't, so I'll confess. I think I was a tough litigator and a tough lawyer as a younger lawyer. And in part that was because, you know, you didn't know when you'd already won, if that makes any sense. You know, you didn't let people up for fear that they were going to sort of come back and bite you. And so as I got to know Mickey, and as Mickey made opportunities available to me, it became clear to me that I couldn't go anywhere in the country without people telling me a Mickey Scheinfeld story. When they learned I was with Scheinfeld, Maley, and Kay, it was like, oh, it's so great to meet you. That Mickey, he's the... And so it became clear that his adversaries loved him, people that he had whipped up on loved him, and I thought, well, I need to soften up because, you know, you don't have to be sort of this hard-nosed to be successful.
I think that's an issue, and that's part of coming to terms with who you are and figuring out who you are. And I know, switch a little bit to kind of the life balance thing, I had a tough time raising my child. I have one child who's now 31, and when he was young and I was toughing it out, I would come home and I would walk in the door and kind of make him toe the line, you know. And suddenly I realized, wait a minute, when I turn the key, I need to go from tough to nurture. There is no nurture. There was no nurture in my career, nothing. So it was literally a Jekyll Hyde thing. And I think that's very tough. And I think we all had to figure out also how to deal with men at work that toughing it out didn't always work. I mean, I resorted to humor all the time. I had this one closing where the guy kept calling me honey. So I decided to call him Buster. And after a while, the clients just were like, what is it with you guys? So he stopped calling me honey, and I stopped calling him Buster, and we got the deal done. But, you know, I did it with, instead of taking him out to the woodshed, I just, you know, did it with humor. But there's so much to figure out how to be what you want to be. It's not just doing your work. And, you know, you think working is good enough. And I really did. I thought working was good enough. But you need to do something else. You need to figure out who you need to be with whom.